Okay, right. Well, I shall just introduce this session. It's Film and TV Looking Through the Lens. So I'm Kat Lewis, and I've run my own television business based in Media City since 2007. And we make programs for all the main channels. And in particular, the household brand that we make is Songs of Praise. In fact, although I set the business up with a very commercial business plan, which meant that I knew from the beginning that I was going to be exporting a lot of my programs internationally, so that we could get that revenue, not just from the profit margin, the production fee, we call it in television, but also from selling the programs internationally. But actually, a lot of the programs we do are not particularly commercial. They're current affairs, children's, and also religious programs like Songs of Praise. So we always have to kind of keep that balance between those shows and also the ones that we can sell internationally. So is it okay if we start off going first of all to you, James? Is that okay? And you could tell us a little bit about your business, Anatic, and also about
so I'm from, my name's James Copson, and I'm from Anatic. We make commercial content for brands, organisations, charities, all kinds of companies. I started my career as a sort of runner in a TV production company in York, and then moved into the commercial sector, and then began Anatic. I think it was 2013, so we've been going a while now. But yeah, my sort of, I studied film and television production at university, and that kind of got me my love of the industry. I'd just taken a slightly different route than sort of TV and film. But yeah, that sort of sums it up.
Lovely, thank you. And Nadia, can you tell us about your business, Little Monk?
Yeah, certainly. So I've only recently set pictures up in the north. Just opened the office in Manchester in the last year. My background traditionally is that I've always sort of worked in scripted television, a little bit of comedy, but generally high-end drama series. I'm currently developing quite a lot of projects with a lot of different writers, and my passion really is for for getting productions up and running in the nations and regions, but also for allowing working class voices to tell working class stories, but on a global scale. It's very early days, but we've got some exciting things going on at the moment.
Excellent. And Kevin, you represent Channel 4, don't you, in the nations and regions? So do tell us about your role.
Sure, yeah, happy to. So yeah, nice to meet everyone. I'm Kevin Blake. I'm the head of partnerships for Channel 4 in nations and regions. Obviously, if you'd had this conversation with Channel 4 a couple of years ago, you'd been talking to someone who was based in London and working in London. We made a big move at the end of 2019 to set up our new bases outside of London for the first time in our 39 years of working, with our new national HQ in Leeds, and also our creative hubs in Bristol and in Glasgow to complement our sales teams in Manchester. So it's been a big period of transition on top of everything else that's happened since then. But really my role is there to make sure that Channel 4 kind of lives up to its commitment to really deliver on that vision for all of the UK, to better represent our audiences, to work with partners across the UK to sort of deliver on our public service remit. And really I have a particular responsibility for helping to develop and support talent outside of London, from entry level and our work experience and trainee schemes through to supporting people on the job and developing their careers without that need to gravitate to London to sort of to progress their careers. So yeah, great to be here.
Excellent, thank you. And Sarah, tell us about your work with the Business Growth Hub.
Yeah, more than happy to. So Sarah Novotny, I head up the digital, creative and tech sector support, which gives me the privilege to really work with a lot of different angles within the sector. And I kind of keep pointing out that whilst we call it the creative sector, it has so many different subsectors that it's really important to kind of like zoom in on those different ones. But in terms of the kind of the TV production and film sector, we've really really happy and privileged, I guess, again, because it is a true privilege. It's such a fascinating sector to bring a couple of support programs to those in the sector that kind of really touch on loads of different facets, from being investment ready to good housekeeping in all things kind of like business knowledge, but then also to how to really kind of start carrying their their content outwards into the world and onto an international level. So that's what the fabulous team behind me is doing.
Excellent. In terms of, I want to first of all start with kind of the pandemic, because obviously it has had a dramatic effect on our industry. Does anybody want to immediately pick up? I'm thinking particularly, perhaps of you, James, because of you working in kind of the advertising sector. How has COVID affected your business?
Obviously, it's, as everyone, I think most businesses have suffered. The first sort of lockdown period, those first few months back in March 2020 were quite scary, because a lot of the projects that we had contracted and set for the year just got canned and cancelled, really. There wasn't much support for our sector financially from the government and in any other way, so that was quite tricky. But I think that after a short period of maybe 3 to 4 months, people began to adapt to working environments, and were able, people still needed to buy products and marketing still needed to happen, but it had to change. So we just had to adapt really with that. We did a lot of live stream content, and that opened up a new door for us. So that's kind of how we kept going, and then things kind of slowly starting to get back to normal.
And did you benefit from the furlough scheme at all?
Not really. Because we were a small team. It's not like we had a huge number of staff to offset and furlough. We've got quite a core crew, so it didn't help too much, to be honest.
And do you feel now that you're seeing the advertising picking up again? Are you winning more commissions again?
Yes, it's definitely picking up. A lot of freelancers we work with, a lot of people we speak to, are all feeling the same thing, and things are picking up. I think as lockdown's relaxing, more people are spending money again, and people are going out, and then there's that kind of battle again to advertise and get your brand and product out there. So people are sort of competing again to get their content seen.
So you mentioned live streaming as a kind of new business opportunity. Have there been any other advantages at all for you?
I don't like to talk about advantages of COVID, but the only thing that I would say is we've had opportunities that we wouldn't usually have had because of people being in the country that might not have been. So we did some work with an F1 driver who would have usually have been flown home to Australia to create content there, but because of restrictions in other countries, wasn't able to. And so that meant that we filled that gap in this country. But yeah.
Excellent. That access to people has been quite extraordinary. I was watching a Zoom with Sir Ridley Scott recently, organised in the Northeast by the University of Sunderland. That was extraordinary. Lord Putnam interviewing him, it was amazing. Kevin, can you talk a little bit about Channel 4 and how Channel 4's kind of managed to kind of cope with the pandemic and now beyond?
Yeah, of course. It's been a challenging time, I think, for all broadcasters and for the sector as a whole. Obviously, being particularly reliant on advertising as our main source of revenue, it was challenging in the initial stages of lockdown. I think just as kind of James is saying, we made a fairly immediate decision to save lots of money, to slow down on anything that wasn't business critical, and therefore shored up our position as much as we possibly could. And then as things improved throughout the course of the year, we were able to put that money back into commissioning and into doing the things that we paused for the time. But it was very difficult. And as things have progressed, it's been great to see how it's become a bit more secure and sustainable as it's gone on. I think the other element is obviously our model is such a partnership with the indies that we work with, and so we've tried to sort of do that hand in hand and not ensure that we're supporting them as much as supporting our own business and looking at it in that regard. And I think in particular for freelancers, it was last spring was an incredibly challenging time for people, which is such a part of the way that the industry works. And trying to support individuals and then small and medium-sized companies in particular has been a challenge. I think it's worth saying that particularly from a nations and regions perspective in the north and then the rest of Iceland, there has been incredible resilience as well. And I think I think that should be called out. I think seeing the sort of the innovation and the creativity in the way that production companies have enabled productions to happen, but also responded creatively to the sort of the challenges of making content around COVID and in our COVID time, whether that's to do with it itself or as a way of sort of thinking about different things, I think is something to be applauded. So it has been a period of innovation and resilience at the same time.
Absolutely. No, we've been in production throughout actually with a really strict COVID protocol, but we've had to do that, and you're right, a lot of production companies have been really innovative. And I just wanted to say a little bit about the production sector that we have in the UK and how the kind of regulation and the way it's set up kind of really benefits us, because I'm not sure everybody necessarily understands that because of our public broadcasting system. Oh, we've lost James, hopefully he'll come back in a minute. But we have this kind of really special system at the moment in the UK, and it is being reviewed by government. So I think it is something that it's really important for people to get potentially kind of get involved in or have a look at the different sides of the argument, because the way it works is that with public sector broadcasters, including public service broadcasters, the PSBs, and that includes Channel 4, it includes also Channel 5, ITV, and of course BBC. They give us as independent producers ownership of our own programs, which allows us to then sell those programs internationally. And if it's a format, we can sell that format. So the classic examples are things like Undercover Boss, where you get kind of a UK version, and you also get an American version, and then they sell the American version into the UK, they sell the UK version into America, and you start to get a business that's incredibly profitable in that sense. And so that ownership, it's called the terms of trade, ownership that we all benefit from, I think is something that is definitely important to fight for. And also there is the question at the moment, isn't there, Kevin, about the potential privatization of Channel 4, which is something that is a debate that comes and goes, but essentially, for a lot of us in the independent sector, we would really not want, Channel 4 to be privatized, because they'll suddenly start kind of competing with ITV and Channel 5, whereas at the moment they provide really important competition for the BBC, because they do make programs like Dispatches and the fantastic Channel 4 News, etc. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's a thing that never really goes away and is comes up for discussion. And there is like you say, a public service broadcasting review going on at the moment. I'm not sure what question that sort of privatization would actually answer. I think it doesn't seem to be the right question to be asking necessarily, but this is the time when all these sorts of things are explored. I think if anything, COVID has raised the importance and the impact of public service broadcasting. And I talk about not just our content, but everything from the BBC and the other public service broadcasters as well. The connection between people across the country when they can't go out and connect with each other, directly, the things that television and some of the amazing content, whether that's documentaries or comedy or drama or factual programming, has provided that sort of connection in a way that maybe people thought the public service model in the era of streamers wasn't as relevant anymore. And I think it's probably doubled down on the fact that it is.
Absolutely. And one thing that I know the industry, a lot of people in the industry are fighting for, is more prominence on the new smart TVs and on the various different systems like Sky, etc., so that people can easily reach All 4 and the other catch-up services, iPlayer, etc. So that gives the PSBs a better chance to compete. But if you are interested in that area, it's the British Broadcasting Challenge.com. That's a campaign that's been launched by a lot of people in order to try and kind of become part of that debate, because a lot of the debate is happening at the moment behind closed doors. And Nadia, do you have anything to say about, terms of trade and the ownership of your IP, etc.?
No, well, aside to say that it is very important, as we know with the big streamers, they tend to buy up your, for an independent producer to run a production company successfully, those residual payments that you get from being able to exploit your productions worldwide, that's kind of the bread and butter that keeps you afloat. And when we sign a project into a streamer, we might get a nice chunky production fee, but actually the rights are then sort of bought up for, years and years and years, and you don't ever see any back end revenue from it. So it's a short-term, it's a short-term win, but actually to enable your business to scale and grow, it doesn't really work as a model. And, working as a producer, an independent producer, we can't live hand to mouth. We need to be investing in the next projects that are coming and constantly developing. You must know, Kat, having done this for years and years, that you're constantly, as profits coming in, it's being reinvested in the next project. So that's why we need those sort of residual payments to keep us afloat.
Absolutely. And that's what's so special about our industry in the UK, that it seems that the politicians have been very forward thinking in that sense. And another way, apart from kind of allowing us to have ownership, is through kind of making programming outside London. That's been incredibly important and sets us apart from other countries' TV and film industries, where often you can only work in the capital city. And we've Kevin's already talked about Channel 4 moving out of London. One of the big issues is the importance of kind of keeping enough people in the areas outside London, the production bases, keeping that fantastic talent pool that we all need of freelancers, because we do tend to be project based. Have you had any problems with talent, Nadia?
Well, interestingly, I've just had a meeting with a writer today who's done that. Well, a comedian writer who's had that thing of moved down to London because he thought that's where the opportunities were. I think the only way that we're ever going to really turn this around is if nations and regions commissioning really does mean nations and regions commissioning, and that the commissioners are investing in companies that are based in the north that want to reinvest in talent in the north. Because I say this with a heavy heart, but I always kind of a heavy sigh when I see another London super indie has opened their northern office, and it's kind of, you kind of go, guys, you do okay out of London. You don't need to move up north and mop up all those regional commissions as well, because they're not reinvesting in talent in the north. And it can't just be, employing a crew in the north. It needs to be that they're seeking out who are the new up and coming writers in the north, who are the new up and coming directors, producers, on-screen talent, and companies like ours, that's what we're doing. We're constantly looking to bring people up through the ranks and to look for that new talent and to really establish the growth in the north. And I think that's kind of, I can see what Channel 4 are doing. We're making steps in the right direction. The news recently about the BBC, again, moving some more of their base out of the north. But I think until we get, truly regional commissions that kind of, I don't know that maybe we hold those regional commissions accountable to the number of northern people that they employ, or to the number of on-screen talent from the nations and regions that get brought onto projects. Maybe there should be a bit more accountability behind it.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there is pretty strict regulation, which Ofcom tightened, fortunately, quite recently, to make sure that, out of London really did benefit from those programs that are supposed to be made, in the regions or the nations. So I think that it has been examined recently, and a few loopholes that were commonly used were closed. But it is incredibly important. And James, do you find that there's enough talent for you when you're running your business?
It's something we've been looking at recently, actually, and I have struggled. We have an internship program with Manchester College, so we bring people, young people in and bring them on shoots. We've found a lot of them, or the 2 or 3 that have gone through us, have all wanted to move to London or have moved to London. And it's really frustrating for me, because you're kind of spending this time trying to educate and nurture them, and then they kind of just want to go to London because that's where all the work is. And you get it, because that is where all the work is, especially in a commercial sense. It's where most of it is. But it feels like a reoccurring problem. Every time you get new talent, if they all go to London, then you're not gonna have that attractiveness in the north, because the talent will just keep going down. So it's partly why I set up where we are, because I'm from Manchester and I kind of didn't want to be sucked down that path. So I kind of wanted to set up in the north. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
I think it is a lot better than it was. Just, I don't know if you're familiar with TV Talent, which is a Facebook group, but a lot of television jobs are advertised now on that. That was set up by Channel 4, Victoria Roy, who's their HR person based in the north. Off-screen talent, I should say, rather than HR. But she's fantastic, and she's set up this group, and it's now got over 5,000 members, and it is really helping. I think. Do you agree, Kevin?
Yeah, I would do. My next meeting after this panel is with Vic, actually, bizarrely enough, so to talk about those sorts of things. Yes, I think there are opportunities, I think, in the north and outside London. Are there enough opportunities compared to having to go to London? Probably not. I think there's still a long way to go. And also, I think if you broke it down into maybe specific genres and looked at specific areas, I think you would also see some discrepancies in those sorts of things. Well, for instance, if your passion was development, and specifically certain types of development, I think that's a harder thing to do outside of London, where you potentially with smaller or medium-sized independent production companies. So I think I think that there is a real growth across Manchester, Yorkshire, and other areas across the north as well. But there is still quite a long way to go. And it should be that the ability to sort of progress your career, the move to London to do that should be an optional thing. It should be brilliant. I want to go to London. It shouldn't be, oh no, I need to go to London because that's where the next steps can be, and there are no options here. And I think there is quite a long way to go to making that a genuine reality in the north of England and in other places outside of London as well.
I think there's a couple of things the broadcasters could do which would really help. One is to make sure that programmes are edited outside London, because if they allow programmes to do their post-production in London, what that means is a lot of the senior creatives who are employed are also in London, because they have to be there during the edit. And it would be, a fantastic way of ensuring that proper investment happens outside London. As you see Soho, and it's just dripping with money with all the post-production suites. And quite a lot of those programs are then registered as made outside London, because they only have to meet kind of certain thresholds to be outside London. But that would be a huge thing. And the other thing is putting returning series out to tender and saying they have to be based outside London. And obviously Channel 4, has been good at doing that. The BBC is increasingly good at doing that. And I think that would make a massive difference, because we all need returning series. That's how we keep teams going. We've got obviously Songs Praise, so we've got a team on that's kind of year round, which is fantastic. We just need more returning series outside London. So, Sarah, do you want to talk a little bit about the talent pool and what can be done to support it?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually going to just chime in, because I think we're at a really critical point, partially pandemic induced, but partially also with this long-standing history of you have to go to London if you want to work in the sector. Because what that means that a lot of those kind of like those shining examples within or aspiring examples that the young talent could be aspiring to, they're just missing in the system here. And we don't see them in the schools careers days. But there's just so much that whole in between step is just missing out. And I know that from a Greater Manchester perspective, there's been so much effort in trying to encourage that and in trying to kind of nurture that ecosystem in order to help that pipeline. And then pandemic hits, it's kind of it's been quite devastating. Thankfully, not as devastating as we were fearing originally. Still, it's still slowed down a lot of things. But what it has meant is actually that there's been a surplus of talent and a lot of or available talent at that particular time, and production houses and companies could go and buy more senior level skills for, they could pick who they wanted, and the chances for those kind of like standing at the beginning of their career have actually been shrinking and shrinking. And that's something that we're very concerned about. That's something that we talk to kind of the local businesses here a lot, whether, trying to encourage them to give an opportunity to those that want to embark on this. And then I guess the entire the credibility of the sector as well. There's been a lot of kind of bad rep for the creative sector. So a lot of parents are not actively encouraging their children to embark on this career path. So just a lot of conversations, I think, that needed to be had. And then us as the kind of connection point of the businesses, and within that business support, to try and amplify their success and try and amplify the opportunities that are within them, and the career paths from script writers to lighting engineers to prop houses, whatever it might be in that ecosystem. There's a lot of invisible work that we need those career starters to see and potentially consider.
Just talking about skills for a minute, I know that Screen Skills, have been doing a lot of good work, a lot of training. And there has been a lot of courses that people have been able to access during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. That's been one positive aspect. And recently, the industry has decided to set up a training fund as well. So there's a certain percentage of money from each budget that's going into a training pot. So anybody who's interested in being trained, or if you're running a company, it's definitely worth tuning in with Screen Skills and what they're doing. Do you want to talk, James and Nadia, about particular skills shortages that you have?
Do you want to go first, James? Or?
No, you jump in. It's fine.
Okay, so specifically in what we've experienced in scripted and sort of drama, bizarrely, accountants are very, very thin on the ground. We're now struggling for location managers, and I know that these are things that Screen Skills have been directly addressing. They have put pots of money towards finding people who want to enter the industry. We're always normally okay for costume, makeup, production designers, I would say again, but as you were saying, Kat, I think what we need to enable talent to come through the ranks is those returning series, because it's usually on those returning series where you'll give somebody an opportunity and say, okay, well, on these 3 episodes, you can step up to be the production designer and we'll give you that, because it's de-risked to a certain element, because it has this team around that constantly, can safeguard that. But yeah, I would say in scripted specifically, it's accountants, it's first ADs are very thin on the ground at the moment, and location managers, because actually the scripted at the moment are so busy, crew are so thin on the ground because we stood down for so long. So not only did we have everybody clambering to finish off the shows that were half shot, we also had all the new commissions, and there's sort of like this huge backlog of material, which is brilliant because everybody's working at the moment. But also we need to bring people up through the ranks so that we don't end up with this shortage.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, James?
Personally, lately we've been struggling to find directors and northern-based talent. There's loads and loads of directors in London, but we just have struggled in the north. And I don't know what it is. Whether they're just not, we can't find them. Maybe they're out there, but we can't find them. But there's not really. Maybe there needs to be a platform for them to go on or struggle.
Do you use that TV talent?
Well, I mean, we're commercial, so sometimes the crossover isn't the same. So they might have TV experience, but when we need to create an advert, it's not the same. And it goes both ways, because we've been trying to look at an avenue of going into TV for a long time, and we often find the doors are closed because we don't have TV experience. So it's kind of both ways, but certainly in commercial, it just seems tricky.
I think it's also, though, just, a lot of my friends in London who are high-end TV directors, the TV producer directors, they do also do adverts. So I think it's definitely worth you kind of exploring, putting an advert on TV Talent North and seeing what comes back, because you might be quite surprised at the skill set that is there, but it's a lot about communication, I think.
I think the other issue we have is I heard the end of a panel earlier, and they were talking about getting into schools at an early age, primary schools, and planting seeds that they can be directors and they can be film, TV representatives in whatever field they want. And I think that we've noticed a lot of crew and creatives are actually migrating out of London now after the pandemic and during the pandemic. So it's opening more access to people, but they're not homegrown, if that makes sense, up in the north. And that's not an issue. It's just an issue for local people in working class backgrounds who might never have thought I can be a TV director. And it doesn't help bridge that gap. It's still kind of there.
It's interesting that Ridley Scott, I was actually at the same school as my mom, but left school with like 2 O levels, and that was it, and then made 2,500 adverts prior to starting his film industry career. So, yeah, it was extraordinary to hear him. And do you want to say anything about skills shortages?
I was just jumping quickly in just to say, because I think this is what you've just mentioned is so critical and so vital, because the whole subsector that we're talking about right now is actually for a long time been so inclusive and so diverse, and we really kind of have to safeguard that and maintain that. Again, just like point to those examples, just like you just did, Kat, and just say, look, there is, whatever path has brought you here, there is potential for you in this sector.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I personally would argue my experiences, having been in the industry for 40 years, that it's actually the last 10 years it's become, perhaps, not the last 2 years, but the 10 years prior to that, it just became more and more and more upper middle class as ITV was, or maybe even the previous 20 years, as ITV was allowed to get rid of its regional franchises and kind of move to London, we'll have less of a commitment out of London. It just did become very, very upper middle class. Once it's London-centric, the barriers to entry are so high, so it makes it really difficult. But Kevin, do you want to talk a little bit about skills gaps?
Yeah, sure, happy to. I think from, obviously, within Channel 4, we work with our production partners to help them crew up and address the skills gaps that they have. And I think from the feedback that we get and the work that we do, it feels a bit like, in a way that Nadia was saying earlier, there is that backlog of productions across both scripted in particular, but to a lesser extent unscripted. That means that crewing up and getting to it is really challenging wherever you are. There is, and specifically in certain roles. And I think, you talked about the sort of production accountant, but that production management, a really good production manager is sort of gold dust. And, the sort of thing that you really, if you've got one, they're in high demand because they do a brilliant job. So you see that, I think, all the time, and then I think particularly at this point, as productions are really getting going again, is particularly astute. I think the other thing that I would add and is around also the importance of diversity perspectives in the recruitment of on air, but massively in terms of off air as well. So making sure that actually the industry feels representative of its audience in terms of the content that we're making and why we're doing it and how that creative process works, and having that diversity of perspectives and thought and viewpoints within that. And that's something that is hugely important to Channel 4. It always has been, but I think is absolutely our number one priority at the moment. So we're doing lots of things in a way to remove the barriers that there might be for people from diverse backgrounds or disabled people or from low socioeconomic backgrounds to think, actually, TV and the creative industry is a career for me. It is relevant to me. I can have a productive and profitable career in that, and it's something that I can really contribute to. So that's alongside the specific skills gap is an incredibly important priority for us.
Absolutely. And I just want to talk a little bit about the fact that in the English regions, we used to have our own kind of screen agency, Northwest Vision and Media, up until 2010, and then that went. And the nations still have very active screen agencies which can support their local independent production. How do people feel about that lack of kind of resource and investment from government kind of within the English regions?
I feel it was a real loss to us, because the one thing that Northwest Vision used to do, as a lot of other regional screen agencies do, is run their short film funds, which is absolutely the first port of call to find young up and coming directors in the regions and to invest in them, and also obviously with incentives. financial incentives to come and shoot here enables those screen agencies to reinvest in training new talent and expanding the crew base. So it's a real loss to us. And I think that it's something that we should all sort of fight to try and get back.
What do you think, James? Did you have anything to do with Northwest Vision and Media?
No, I've not got any experience with that, I'm afraid. But I would say that I don't think there isn't enough investment. I think on skills training, so at early level careers, and like I said, in sort of school level education on career paths for that industry. I don't know how it's changed now in schools, but certainly when I was at school, there was no inkling of any possibility that I could be in film and TV or media production. I just had no sort of prospect in that. I didn't know that was a thing. It was out of chance that I kind of came across it. So I think that there could be more investment in early stage stuff and getting cameras in young children's hands and letting them create stuff and work and make things.
I think as well, the other thing is that I've worked a lot in Northern Ireland, and obviously Northern Ireland Screen were absolutely incremental in bringing Game of Thrones to the region, and that has revolutionised their industry, not just the film industry, but the tourism industry. It has brought so much money into that region that they've then been able to reinvest. And I've worked with them quite a lot, and I really, really value the work that they do, because they are actively, constantly looking at where do we need to reinvest, how can we get young children through the ranks. They do a lot of outreach work. They commission a low budget feature every year. So they do a lot. And I think if you get it right, if you bring a big show into the area that's a long running show, it can bring growth to all industry, not just film and television.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Could you talk to us, Sarah, a little bit about that as well?
I think, from my perspective, which is kind of the support of the freelancers and the businesses at hand, I think the role that we're playing in this is to kind of like listen and amplify their wants and needs and wishes, and kind of try and bring that in a as clear and kind of like focused way to government and to local government, and to bring together as much as possible, just like today, to be honest, initiatives like this where we're recognizing regions can't do things in isolation. We have to be collaborative, and we have to use that combined voice to ask for things, and to ask and try and get closer to where we would like to be for the industry.
What do you think, Kevin? Are independents in the regions missing out?
So I think just the loss of some of those regional screen agencies and bodies, has had a negative impact on the support they will give to independent production companies. I think so. If you take, say, Leeds, where we've set up, obviously we have a really good partnership approach with the councils, the LEP, but also Screen Yorkshire do have as one of the sort of. They came out of that process as one of the only remaining sort of screen agencies, and fair play to Sally there, who's done an amazing job of pushing that forward. And in a way, actually, with Create Central, which has emerged in the past 12 months, there's sorts of things I think are trying to replicate their model a little bit. But there is a difference when you look to the work, as Nadia was saying, that Screen Northern Ireland can do, or Screen Scotland, or Creative Wales, and we work with them all very closely. There is something particularly compelling and effective about their ability to more quickly, utilize funds and then direct them in a more active way than you have in the English regions. And, they're more closely entwined with the sort of work of government, which isn't the case with the sort of the regional bodies in this way. And so I think that, there is something advantageous for us as a broadcaster to work directly with them. And then they are really invested in wanting to see their production sectors grow and support those independent companies, because they know that brings back money, exactly as I was saying. I think Game of Thrones is probably a one-off, but then there's something like anything towards that scale is amazing, just because it brings all those things back in. And so I think there is an advantage there, and any way to sort of start to sort of do something similar. I think, look, again, in West Yorkshire, I think Tracy Braben being the newly elected mayor will add more coordination and focus to that. But again, it's something that I think is a work in progress.
And when those screen agencies closed, and well done to Sally to refuse to close Screen Yorkshire, she's amazing. Yeah. But when they all closed, they kind of merged, didn't they, into Creative England.
Yeah.
Are they still able to kind of help and support regional indies?
I think they do, but it's a less. I mean, I don't understand the process, and it varies a little bit, I think, depending on where you are. But I think there's basically less money to go around than there used to be, and also it's less focused as interventions. Whereas you get Screen Yorkshire, and their clear remit is to increase film and TV production within Yorkshire, and then they bring everything under that banner, and them working with them that's the process. Whereas they say with Creative England, who are do a sterling job, it's the broader patch and a harder thing to then still get those specific things away. So I think it's just easier, isn't it, when it's more focused that way?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move on to the private sector and investment from venture capitalists, because traditionally, I think it's fair to say that our industry has been seen as a little bit, difficult to invest in. And certainly because we're outside London, that can be another barrier. Sarah, could you talk to us a little bit about your experience of that?
Yes. It's a great segue actually into, and I know it's been referenced a couple of times throughout the day, but we run a program called, I should say a DCMS funded program called the Creative Scale Up Program, which is all about, it's a twofold kind of education stream. On one side, it's the creators and the creative businesses and about getting them investment ready. So, and all of the components are necessary for that. But on the other side, and very importantly, there is the education stream that is educating investors in order to understand the industry a bit better, to understand what good looks like, the potential that's there. Because again, there's been an earlier conversation about scale-ups. Of course, we have a definition of scale-ups and investors are looking for scale-ups, but a scale-up business within the creative world and within the kind of the film and TV production is a completely different thing. We're project-based. There is a whole host of freelancers that kind of get together to create something and then they kind of disperse, and it's kind of a constant contracting and expanding, and that's something that investors have to get used to, quite frankly. And we're very much working on increasing that appetite, and we're also helping with various tools. And I encourage every investor that might be on this call today to kind of get in touch with us or GC Angels to kind of start that journey of finding out more and dipping their toe into what it means to be an investor in this world.
Is this an area that you're familiar with, Nadia? Have you got investors, or are you planning to get them?
I will be getting investment eventually. It's really interesting because I have a separate business, which is a manufacturer, and it's in fashion, and securing the investment for that was so very easy because the business model was, I'm going to make this and it'll cost this, and then I'll sell it for that and you'll get X amount. So trying to and also just knowing the length of time that development can take on projects and the period that you need the investment for, potentially before there might be a return, specifically in scripted, because scripted shows can take a long time. It's not unusual for a 2-year development process with scripted, so kind of, if it's not an industry specific investor, I think it's really difficult to kind of explain what the business model is.
What about you, James?
I forgot what the question was. I was listening to Nadia. We haven't got investors. It's something we're open to in the future. Sorry, I don't know what else to add to that one.
Kevin, do you want to talk to us about the Channel 4 Growth Fund at all?
Sure. So the Growth Fund is our kind of an investment vehicle in a way from a Channel 4 perspective to invest in sort of up and coming independent production companies and both provide that sort of it's run on a commercial model, and that we ultimately expect to get a return from it, but to provide that sort of influx of capital, but also then support and expertise and training and development and everything like that to helpfully grow those smaller indies into real creative institutions. And so I think in line with our work over the past few years, the Growth Fund is now focused entirely on nations and regions, indies as well. So it's made recent investments in Duck Soup in Leeds and other places as well. So it is a kind of in-house investment team. And I think as does have a real positive impact on the indies that we invest in.
Excellent. So I just want to take some, there's a little bit of information that's coming in, which is in terms of jobs. I spotted one. There's a company. Maybe Sam, you could send me another email. I spotted there was somebody saying that, a database platform for all types of creative professional sourcing, and it's called Raw Revolt. So that's worth you knowing about, James, and anybody else who's out there. Raw Revolt, Ben Spriggs, information through. So I just wanted to make sure that I kind of pass that on. I just want to move on next to kind of trends in the creative industries sector, whether there are kind of, things that you've noticed that are happening, perhaps particular genres that are taking off or particular types of programming. Obviously, for us in television, we're competing against, Netflix, all the, the platforms now that are streaming amazing programs 24/7. Is there anything, James, that you've noticed within your part of the creative industries that you think it's good to watch out for over the next 12 months?
From a commercial point of view, there's obviously been a lot of self-shot things and Zoom calls. I think people are a bit sick of those. And then from a company that's sort of looking at expanding into TV, I have been to a lot of the commissioner briefings, and the trends seem to be from channels that budgets are getting smaller, but then all the streaming platforms' budgets seem to be kind of getting bigger. And they're the ones that are attracting all the audiences. So it feels to me like they may be doing something right in terms of quality or output, and that a lot of the sort of channels tend to grow towards these formats that are maybe less popular. Don't know.
What do you think, Nadia?
I think, it's just what you've said, it's really difficult to compete with those sort of big budget American shows. But yeah, I think I'm pleased to see that there's a lot more female-led drama coming out at the moment. There's a real movement towards female writers as well, female written projects, which I think is really positive. Comedy-wise, I was delighted to see that the BBC Three are going back linear, because I think that they've done some exceptional comedy over the last sort of 5 years, and excited to see what they do. But no, generally, I think people are just looking for shows that can be made in the UK, but that travel, that are of scale, that have that glossy feel to them, that so that they stand up on those platforms against those big budget shows.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Are you finding, Nadia, as well, that you have to kind of bring in money from lots of different places, not just rely on your PSP?
Yeah. So the days of making drama where we have a show that costs £1 million and we go to the BBC and they give us £1 million are over. It's kind of the packaging now for television programs is pretty much the same as the packaging for feature films. It's drawing on lots of different financial avenues, tax incentives, finding where we can access soft money. So it is much more like the feature film model now in television.
Which presumably, again, adds to the pre-production process.
Yeah.
Okay, and do you rely, I have to ask, on your other business to actually pay for your, pay your salary while you're doing all this development?
No. Bizarrely, I had the pandemic. I had quite a good year. I actually sort of diversified. I executed a show for AMC, but I also ended up doing a lot of commercials, which I'd never done before. But that sort of enabled me to sort of cash flow for this. I mean, the hope is that eventually, because that we're only launching my other business in September. But so the hope will be that eventually, I'll commission my own shows.
Fantastic. Yeah, Kevin, do you want to talk about trends that are coming up over the next 6 to 12 months?
It's a tough question, I would say. I think generally, TV and film production in the UK is an incredible asset. I think that it is a real creative strength of the UK, and something that is exportable, and sort of really reflects well on everyone who's part of it, and I think that is only going to continue for all different genres, with all those different types of funding models and revenue streams that clearly are now part of the mix in a way that they certainly weren't to anywhere near the same degree 10 years ago, is going to continue. And I think while you know, that means increased competition and increased competition for audiences, for broadcasters. I think it's probably a really positive thing for, you know, producers and people who want to make great content and tell those sorts of stories. I think the one thing I will go back to is probably around that sort of diversity of those perspectives and that storytelling and having those kind of really authentic, you know, authentic messages and stories to tell, whether that's in comedy, drama, factual, current affair, whatever it could be. I think that's the sort of thing that's massively important from a Channel 4 point of view.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for taking part, and I hope that the people listening enjoyed as well. Thank you.
Thank